Right. Can I get you to just go to the next slide there, Mark? And I'll do the introductions.
It doesn't seem to want to advance.
Oh.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll spare you from having to talk about yourself. So our presenter for our last session is Mark Mason. Mark is a certified fire and explosion and vehicle fire investigator. He's also a G1 gas tech and liquid propane tech. He has over 25 years of experience in the hydrocarbon fuels industry, which includes 14 years with the TSSA as a compliance senior inspector and investigator. That's in Ontario. 10 years as a gas technician for Union Gas / Union Energy. 2 years as a pipeline inspector / investigator for Alberta Energy Regulator, and 6 years, actually, I think, Mark, 6 years now, as a fire investigator for Origin and Cause. He's led over 500 fire investigations and 100 explosion investigations involving natural gas, propane, fuel oil, diesel, gasoline, hydrogen, and landfill gas. So, Mark, I'm going to hand it off to you. Please, yeah, let's finish up the day.
All right, great. Thanks, Mark. Hope everybody's had a good afternoon, and there's been, some good information shared. So my presentation is going to cover a couple of things. The first one's a travel trailer explosion, and that is the result of the explosion right there. As you can see, this part right here, I have to go back, sorry. So this, that's a couch. This is the frame of the trailer, and I'll advance it a little bit more, but anyways, we'll get into this a little bit more. So yeah, it was a pretty good boom off this trailer. So it was somewhat different than a normal explosion in that it involves a travel trailer. We don't normally get those situations, only in that the travel trailers are fairly leaky and don't normally hold the propane in, which would increase the likelihood of it reaching the explosive limit. But anyways, yeah, I got called to this one. It was -30 out, and it was pretty cold, I gotta tell you. The person involved in the explosion survived with relatively minor injuries. Again, it was presented as a 2001 travel trailer explosion. So the original email made references to a propane supply issue. There were multiple propane supply locations hooked to the trailer and to an adjoining barn with propane heaters. So it involved a couple cylinders, as you'll see as we go along here. The references were made to the use of the propane stove and the propane heater for the trailer. So apparently he couldn't get the heater going, or the heater wouldn't start. He tried to light the stove, and that's, I guess, when it exploded. So the attendance by the fire and explosion investigator was delayed by 8 days. I didn't get there until 8 days after this. This is how I found the scene. So just keep that in mind. And it was a fairly remote location in northern Alberta, and there was no scene security to preserve the evidence. So the scene, as found at the time of the examination, like I said, involved multiple propane cylinders. They had a unique situation where they put hay bales placed around the trailer for extra insulation, because they wanted to use this in the winter time. When extra people came or whatever, they could use it as a bunkhouse or something. The propane equipment involved included a refrigerator, a range, a furnace, and a water heater for the travel trailer. The trailer was connected to power supply through the trailer electrical cord. Additional equipment outside the trailer included 2 barn heaters installed inside the adjacent barn, where they had some hay and other things stored inside the barn. The debris field was approximately 180 meters at its furthest point. So the insured had trouble getting the furnace to ignite, and that's, I guess, the start of what happened there. So the insured tried to light the range for heat when the explosion occurred. The insured was injured in the explosion, but survived. And the preliminary findings by propane supplier investigator was a furnace explosion. The findings were supported by the fire department investigator. So that's just, how I found it and how it was told to me. So this is the propane supply. It's basically, it's a trailer cylinder. And then the one on the right here, this is a 100-pound cylinder. That was actually feeding the barn heaters. So this is essentially how I found the scene with the propane cylinders involved. The propane cylinders consisted of a 40-pound connected directly to the trailer in the area of the furnace and the range, and 100-pound cylinders connected to the barn heaters. The propane for the barn heaters were connected utilizing a CSA certified propane hose only, which is not an approved use for the hose. It is commonly used with a portable or mobile appliances. It didn't have anything to do with the explosion. I make note of that just for everybody's knowledge, that you can't normally hook anything up with a hose. It usually has to be portable or it has to be mobile. So if you're going to use a hose, just for everybody's knowledge, I guess. So propane for the travel trailer is connected using a CSA certified propane hose with a QCC1 connector. Now that's just a quick connector that you'd find on a barbecue cylinder. Anybody who's unhooked or hooked up a propane cylinder, it'd be a connector there. And the propane regulator for the trailer. So there was a regulator on this system. It wasn't just cylinder pressure that was going in there. There was a regulator there. The QCC1 connectors are commonly used on cylinders with barbecue, travel trailers, and portable appliances. Various other hoses were found at the scene with sheared brass connections. So this is essentially how it was hooked up. There's the regulator there on the right, and that's another look. And there's basically two hoses going into this system here. So I tried to figure out how far the debris field, and that's, there's debris out here. That's approximately 108 meters from where the trailer was. Now we have to take into account these trailers are not made well, and you can get, if you get a blast from this trailer, it's probably going to send debris fairly far. So we have to keep that in mind. That's taken from the debris. So that's about 108 meters out from where the explosion actually occurred. That's substantial debris is what I'm getting at. Like that's, some sort of a window frame or something. So it wasn't just insulation that blew out there or anything like that. That's actually part of the framing there. So that's a window that was blown out from the trailer over in this area. In the background there, that is the hay barn that collapsed because of the explosion. So this is the area where the furnace, the refrigerator, and the range were, which, they're not really moved too far from where their original location was within the trailer. So, Mark goes looking for the water heater. Like, where's the water heater? Mark spends pretty close to half an hour looking for the water heater. Can't find the water heater. Figures, okay, well, I'm going to call up the insured and see where this, water heater is. So the insured was in the hospital, but the partner for the insured, she answered and said, "Oh yeah, no, we had removed the water heater." So I thought, okay, so the water heater is not going to be here. It's not going to be in the debris field. So I do go looking, and I do find an open line, which is that line right there, with the copper line going to it. And there it is there. And there's no shear marks on any of those threads. It doesn't look like it's been sheared off or anything like that. It just looks like it's been disconnected, which would, basically mean that, yes, they have removed the water heater. Like I said, I looked for the water heater for a while, and it's cold out, and I figured, okay, I'm not going to look for it anymore, so I'm going to call somebody. So I called the insurance, and she said her partner was still in the hospital and couldn't speak. However, she said the water heater was removed a couple months ago to be replaced. They did not cap the line, but said they turned off the electrical switch to the water heater. They believed that shutting off the electrical switch shut off the propane supply to the water heater. Yeah, that's what they believed. And look, I can't fault them too much for this, because lay people sometimes don't really understand how the propane supply works. So If you cut off an electrical switch, sometimes, and things stop working, people think, okay, the propane supply is cut off as well. So also the propane supply to the trailer was modified from its original configuration to accommodate the hay bales. So there was a bit of gerrymandering with the propane supply, which didn't help with the situation, but also didn't really hurt it too much, I suppose. But removing the water heater and leaving an open line, that would be a problem. So the supply line for the water heater was still hooked to the main regulator to the trailer. And when the propane supply was connected and turned on, the open propane line to the water heater did not allow for any other appliance to remain lit, as the pressure could not be maintained with the open line. Basically, what's going to happen is all that propane is going to go through the open line. It's basically least resistance. It's going to go where it's not resisted much, and that's what happened. So the bulk of the propane went out that open line. The leaking propane settled in the trailer and built to at least a lower explosive level of 2.5% propane to air. This concentration found a competent ignition source, the range spark igniter, when he's trying to light the range because it's cold in there. So that's what happened. The propane ignited and created an explosion. So some lessons learned here, and I had some lessons learned. Always have a certified explosion investigator attend the scene as soon as possible after the incident. This is crucial, really, in order to maintain the scene security and to get as much information as possible from people at the time, because things become muddled after that. So as soon as possible, have a certified explosion investigator get to the scene. You can have specialists come in after that, but some explosion investigators should get there quickly. So always have the scene secured until all interested parties can attend the scene and conduct a joint scene examination. So if everybody can't get there at the same time, it'd be nice to have fencing put up or security put on the site so that we can have some scene security there. Interview the insured and all witnesses before coming to a conclusion as to the cause. And document all appliances and supply containers to properly assess the original location and the chances they may have been involved in the incident. Now, when I was looking at this originally, when I assessed the situation here, I knew I had an explosion, and I was told that the furnace and the range were not operating properly. So ideally, that's where I kind of focused, and the less information I get before I go there is probably a better thing. Because you tend to get a little biased when you go to the scene, and you tend to go to where it is you think that this might have happened. The water heater being removed wasn't even in my wheelhouse originally, but because you couldn't find it and you asked the insured, this is what happened. So that's the first scene that I'd like to go through you with. Now, the scene itself presented as the explosion came from, I guess, the right side of the trailer there, which is where the water heater was, not in the back corner where the barn was and the propane supply was. So in my initial 360 of it, I was like, there's a lot of damage to this one side, but I wasn't, sure where that propane may have settled. After I found out that the water heater was removed and there was an open line there, this made sense as to why there was so much damage on that one side. So I guess, some of the lessons that I got out of this and some of the lessons that maybe you might get out of this is try not to get too much of a tunnel vision and into what you might think might be the problem here. Sometimes it presents totally different when you get to the scene. So the second case study that I wanted to go through you with was a desiccant dehydrator fire. Now, this desiccant dehydrator was installed at a cannabis drying facility. The desiccant dehydrator is used to basically keep the air as dry as possible so that they can dry out the weed. and I'm going to call it weed and cannabis at the same time. I apologize, but that's just me. So, but anyways, this is the desiccant wheel that is installed inside of basically what is a makeup air unit that's modified to have this wheel. These have become really popular. This was like one of the, maybe only the second time I had seen something like this. So this desiccant wheel basically, it's basically got, and I don't even know what to call it other than the desiccant, but it basically takes the moisture out of the air, and it turns at a very slow rate. So I'll show you the airflow in just a second, but so this is a picture of the unit, and it closely resembles a makeup air unit that you'd see on the roof of a building or the outside of a building, where they use it for makeup air and heating of the unit and to replace air in the building. So yeah, this is just a picture of it. These are the inlet and the outlet air supplies that go through the unit. Let me go back here. Yeah, so yeah, that's the process and regen ductwork attached to the equipment outside the building. So this was just outside the building, basically on the one side of the building. So this was presented as a specialty piece of equipment used in the wholesale cannabis production industry. The equipment was a natural gas direct fire makeup air dehydrator with a maximum BTU rating of 745,714, which is fairly unique as far as a BTU rating is concerned. But anyways, the fire damage was only to the appliance. However, there was some smoke damage to the product inside the building. So the damage to the appliance was the main thing. There was, I think they lost some of the product. So that's where we were on this. We were retained as the investigator for the service company who was working on equipment at the time of the incident. The service company was also the installer of the equipment, which was previous 2 years prior to this, I believe. The equipment was used as the main source of humidity removal from the process rooms. The scene was a secured location and could not be accessed without a key card through the fence gate. So unlike the last scene that I showed you, this one was fairly secured. They had actually put up a wooden construction outside of this piece of equipment to actually shield everybody from the weather. Again, it was minus 30 out in the middle of winter. When I go to this, I give you 2 of these just to tell you how cold it is in Alberta most of the time. Anyways, the scene was examined by investigators representing the owner of the equipment prior to the attendance of the other investigators. So there was some work done here prior to any other investigators getting involved. There were 5 investigators assigned for the installation company. OCI, the other service company, the cannabis company, the manufacturer, and an additional investigator for a shared liability insurer. So, there's a lot of people involved here is what I'm getting at. So the scene, as found at the time of examination, like I said, the equipment was a gas dehydrator built specially built by the manufacturer, which was makeup, I believe it was, it'll come to me, I'll let you know. The equipment is utilized in other applications, but is not a generic piece of equipment. So Engineered Air, sorry, that's the name of the company. They build a bunch of these, but they can be modified in order to whatever the client requires. So they can put extra switches on here or put extra pieces of equipment on, whatever the company requires. But it is kind of a generic piece of equipment, and they can just modify it to fit whatever it is that the client requires. So the main dehydration wheel inside the equipment had direct contact fire damage. So this desiccant wheel basically got burnt by fire. There was no excess heat or anything like that. It was fire that hit that. There was smoke and heat damage to other components within the equipment. The electrical and gas components appeared to be intact with only some minor damage to electrical switches occurring. And the electrical switches were safeties or basically wiring inside the unit. The entire piece of equipment was boxed with wood walls and a plastic tarp ceiling to preserve the scene and allow for examination of the equipment, which was good because it did snow. So after this incident, not only did it keep us nice and warm and allow us to do what we needed to do outside of the elements, it also kept everything off of the equipment, such as snow or ice or anything like that. So this is essentially how it works. So the process air comes in through here, goes through the desiccant wheel, and then goes out. The regeneration goes in through here, through a set of filters, and it's heated, and then it goes out into the building. So these filters here are normally not used during the wintertime, and they were in place when we did the examination of this equipment. And the reason for that is that they tend to freeze up and create an airflow problem, which I think was probably some of the problems with the equipment. So again, this is just showing you the scene as we found it at the time of the examination. The fairly nice structure that they built around this thing for us. That is the main appliance regulator that was utilized on the equipment. So the inlet supply pressure to this regulator here, is 5 pounds, and the supply pressure to the unit is designed to be by the regulator 7 inches water column, or approximately 4 ounces. So that's normal. Normally you're going to have no more than 7 inches or 4 ounces. Some equipment takes higher pressure, but not normally. The regulator was replaced by another service company prior to the current service company working on the unit. The natural gas supply was adjusted by cannabis company personnel when the unit was not working. Now I say adjusted, and I'm being liberal there. It was not adjusted properly, and they did what they needed to do to get that thing working from time to time. We'll go into that a little bit later into the presentation, but yeah, I'm being very kind when I say adjusted. It was, we'll say adjusted and leave it at that. The unit was installed at or about July 2019. The unit was installed by the company we were representing. The installation company stopped servicing the unit in 2020 due to outstanding payments. So they stopped going because they weren't getting paid for the service calls. So they decided, okay, well, we're not going to provide service anymore. So another service company was working on the equipment prior to the installing company attending, but they stopped providing service due to lack of payment as well. So now there was a time period when the equipment was being serviced by the cannabis company personnel to keep it working, and the equipment frequently required resetting when it failed to fire. So when it fails to fire and people go and reset that unit, that's not always a good thing, because you should be looking for other things as to why this thing's not firing. There might be some other issues with it. And if you're not properly trained on this unit, you're not really going to figure out, all you're going to do is reset it, and it might work for a little while, but you're going to run into the same problem down the road. So the employees did not have certification or sufficient knowledge of the equipment to properly assess and repair it. The cannabis company denied that their employees serviced the equipment. However, the company we were representing said, well, they know that they did, because when they went there to service the equipment, they asked the people, like, what are you doing and they told them they were servicing the equipment. So I know the cannabis company didn't want us to know that, but that was the case. The installing company attended the scene and noted the wrong pressures being supplied to the equipment on multiple service calls. So every time that they went back to this piece of equipment, the pressures were being, let's say, adjusted. Now, that doesn't just happen. The pressures don't just increase or decrease unless there's a problem with the regulator, which it was replaced, or somebody's manually adjusting the pressures. So who doesn't really know what they're doing. So I think, not to say that that was the major problem, but it could have been. Again, the hypothesis that I came up with is, different from what their investigators found. But anyways, the day of the incident, the installation company had a service tech receiving direction from the manufacturer to allow the unit to fire. So basically, our insured had called the manufacturer and was looking for direction on what they should do here. So the direction involved bypassing the high fire switch in order to get the unit to run. So they told them to bypass the high fire switch, which normally this thing starts on low fire and then cycles up to high fire. For some reason or other, they told them to bypass the high fire switch. And I don't know why, but they did. The high fire switch time delays the unit from going to high fire, and in bypassing the switch, it enables a quicker analysis of the problem. So this is an old service tech kind of thing. They basically, you take all the switches out so that you can get the thing to fire so that you can come to the reason as to why it's not firing. Yeah, not a good thing to do, but you do it as a way to kind of diagnose what's wrong with the unit. The bypassing of the switch initiated the startup of the unit faster. However, the fire occurred immediately after the unit fired. So immediately after the unit fired, there was smoke and desiccant material coming out the vent, and they shut it down immediately. So the condition of the unit prior to servicing by the insured. The unit had increased pressures being supplied to both the inlet and manifold side of the unit. The unit had been worked on by non-certified personnel prior to the insured attending and servicing the unit. This is not, like, we're not speculating. They actually asked them, like, what did you do? And they told them what they did in order to get the unit running. So the unit was not being operated as per manufacturer's certified instructions. So there's a couple things that they had done. The one guy said he had to go and kick the damper motor in order to get the dampers to open up, and the filters were still in minus 30-degree weather, which is not the way these are supposed to work. So there's damage to downstream components in the burner manifold due to the repairs initiated by the cannabis company personnel, as revealed later by x-rays of the components. So they removed the components, we x-rayed them, and you could see that there was damage to some of these components. But it didn't go any further than that, which was kind of mystifying to me. But so the manifold and the desiccant wheel and the supply regulator were removed and x-rayed. The x-rays were inconclusive and required additional testing and assembly to determine failure mechanism. So there was some stuff in the x-rays that indicated that there might have been a problem, but we would have had to do additional testing and disassembly to ensure that to kind of prove that hypothesis. So I would have liked to have done that. I never got the chance. So the focus was on the actions of the insured service personnel on the day of the fire, along with the direction from the manufacturer. There was no further testing done of the equipment, and a determination was made by the cannabis company investigators that the actions of the insured personnel caused the incident. I can't say that, and I don't know how they can say that with 100% when there wasn't a lot of testing done here. So if I can say anything, we need to exhaust all of these options before you come to a conclusion. So the cannabis company investigators determined the fire was caused by the actions of the insurance company personnel, and no further testing was to be conducted. I disagreed with the findings, indicating that the remaining equipment required further testing and disassembly to determine the failure mechanism. I also requested interviews with the cannabis company personnel, but I was denied access to them. They determined that if further testing was to be conducted, that we would have to perform the testing and they would observe. So they're basically putting the onus on the company that was servicing the equipment to prove that they didn't do anything wrong. It was kind of a reverse onus at that point. So I advised the adjuster that they would have to prove our insured actions caused the failure of the equipment outside of any other factor. And the decision was made to inform them that we would not be conducting tests. So as much as I would have liked to have taken everything apart and done additional testing on this equipment, you know, they would have had to come back to us and say, we believe that your insured was the reason why this happened, and here's why. And we never did get that determination. So some of the lessons learned here, for myself and even for, you know, adjusters in the field, you know, always have a knowledgeable person retained for the equipment being investigated. In this instance, you know, I had seen this unit, you know, in its generic form, you know, probably over 1,000 times, but with the wheel on it, it created a little bit of a different situation. So that I had to get up to speed on, but the actual equipment and how it operated, I was pretty well versed on how that happened, how that works. Always gather as much technical information about the equipment and how it operates. Involve the manufacturer early in the investigation. So if there's a problem with this equipment, and I don't care if it's just a house furnace or it's a garage heater, the manufacturer should always be involved early. They can give you they can be your best ally sometimes in order to find out what the problem was here. So I would say get the manufacturer involved early. Interview all the service personnel and get statements as to what was done and by whom and when. So I interviewed our insured service people, but I was denied access to anybody else. Nobody else was given any statements. So you do as much as you can with what you're given, but you can't always get, you know, all of the people involved. You get the service history of the equipment and the work done by previous service companies or owner service personnel. So there'd be a service history here. All of the companies involved had the service history. We had the service history for the insured, but we didn't have a lot of service history from any of the other people involved. So it would have been nice to have that knowledge as well. You should always exhaust all testing and examination procedures before determining the failure mechanism and cause of the fire. So the failure mechanism always needs to be 100% determined. And if you can't, then it's an undetermined. You know, you have to be able to go through this and test and examine and make sure that you're overturning every rock so that you can say for certain that this was the case. Do not conduct any testing or examination procedures of the equipment if it is not your insured's. You can suggest additional testing and allow the owner of the equipment to conduct testing. This is, you know, I've made, you know, recommendations all the time that I think that this is what should happen. There's sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But in my experience, additional testing and examination always helps with, you know, even if it becomes an undetermined cause, at least you can say you exhausted every angle on it, and that's, you know, that's always what you're kind of looking for. So that's it. If
Hey, thank you, Mark.
Go ahead.
We do have some questions. This one pertains to the first case study. And
Yes.
And so was the 100-pound propane tank connected into the system or purely used for the barn heaters?
Yeah, the 100-pound propane cylinder, and I probably didn't go into this in the presentation. There's a difference between a tank and a cylinder, and I guess it's just a tank is built to a different standard. So whenever you're referring to something that has an internal, basically a relief valve on the valve, normally that's a cylinder, and they're built to a different standard. So that 100-pound cylinder was only supplying propane to the barn. That's it. There was no propane supplied to the trailer at all from that 100-pound cylinder.
Okay. You also mentioned that the barn heaters were connected using a propane hose only, and that was not approved. I guess the alternative would be a line.
Yeah, they should have had a hard line going into this barn. You can't just hook things up with a hose. It's not allowed as per code. You're probably not going to have a problem with it, but you also can't run the hose through a wall. So there's a lot of restrictions on where you can use a hose. And just using a hose without having any piping is never a good idea.
Okay. So here's a question about the second case study.
Sure.
I believe. Given the fact that no one was getting paid, would it be right to assume this was done on purpose to collect insurance? Don't know if we can comment on that.
Yeah, I can't comment on that. I mean, I doubt it because it was our insured who did it. They're not going to get any insurance money out of this. So they were essentially called their insurance company because they were put on notice.
Hey, could you clarify the parties involved in the second case study?
Sure. So there was basically there was the one service company which was previous to our service company. So that was the other service company. There was our service company. There was the cannabis product maker. They had their own investigator.
Mhm.
There was the manufacturer of the equipment had their own investigator. And there was one other one. Oh yeah, there was I think there was another insurance company involved because this was a split kind of situation with the policy. So I think there was another investigator involved as well because of that.
Okay, you were representing the service company slash installer of the equipment, right?
That's correct. The installer of the equipment and the last people to actually have worked on the equipment when this happened.
Okay, great. All right, we're going back to the first case study. You
Sure.
mentioned that the water heater had been removed several months prior to the explosion. Had anybody been staying in the travel trailer during that time?
Yeah, I asked that question and they said, well, they didn't really use it for a while because they had to get the hay bales around it. So they were just trying to get the furnace working because they had some people coming to stay. So they had removed the water heater because the water heater wasn't working and they were going to replace it. But yeah, it wasn't really being used up until that point. So they were starting up the trailer because they had company coming to stay, I believe, is what the case, what was happening there.
That makes sense. Okay, if anybody else has any questions, we'll hang around for a couple minutes, see if anything else comes in. Otherwise, Mark, thank you so much. Mark just arrived in Seattle too, so he was really under the gun trying to get online. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we got here's one more question. Are travel trailers not equipped at the factory with gas detectors?
Yeah, no, they don't. Normally, they don't put gas detectors in. I know some of the higher end ones nowadays have it. They've got CO detectors in there. I know that for a fact. But some of the higher end ones will have like a propane indicator or alarm. But not this one was like 2001, so there's no way you're gonna have that. But some of the newer ones, the newer high end ones, I'm pretty sure they have that.
Okay, I think that just about does it. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a bit of a gauntlet getting through 5 presentations, but they're all extremely interesting. So, and Mark, thank you. I think you kept everyone interested as you kind of rounded out the day here.
Okay.
And that'll do it. Mark, you got your contact
Excellent.
information up there if anybody else wants to reach out.
Yeah, just give me an email or shoot me an email or whatever, and give me a call. And yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.